She stayed in her sister's shadow at the royal feast until the Alpha King chose her first. Nadia had been getting ready in the same bathroom as her sister for 26 years, and somehow, every single time, she still ended up feeling like the background of a photograph. That evening was no different. Her sister Layla stood in front of the mirror in a dress that seemed made specifically to make every other woman in the room feel invisible. Gold, floor length, fitted in a way that made people stare without meaning to. Layla was doing her lipstick with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of always being the one people looked at first. Nadia was behind her, trying to zip up a dress she had borrowed from Layla's wardrobe, because she didn't own anything suitable for an event like this. It fit, but it didn't feel like hers. Nothing in the room felt like hers. "You're coming with me because Rania canceled," Layla said, not unkindly. "And because you never go anywhere." She turned around, looked Nadia up and down, and then said, with the calm certainty of someone who had no idea how cutting her words were, "You look fine. Come on." Fine. Nadia looked at herself in the mirror one more time after Layla left the room. She had learned, somewhere along the way, that quiet was easier. That staying one step behind kept things peaceful. That there was a certain dignity in not needing attention. She believed that, mostly. She picked up her bag and followed her sister out the door. The Ashford estate sat at the end of a private road that stretched so long, Nadia genuinely wondered if they had taken a wrong turn. Then the trees opened up, and there it was. A hall that looked like it had been pulled out of a century that still believed in grandeur. Stone walls. Tall windows glowing warm from the inside. Cars parked along a gravel path like a quiet parade of wealth. Layla grabbed her hand as they walked inside. "Don't disappear on me," she said. Nadia almost laughed. The hall was full. 300 people, maybe more, all of them dressed like they belonged somewhere important. There was a string quartet in the corner playing something Nadia couldn't name but felt she should know. The tables were laid out with candles and flowers, and more forks than anyone needed for a single meal. The ceiling was painted. The walls held paintings. Nadia stopped walking. There was a painting above the east archway, a woman near a window. The light in it was wrong. Or rather, it was so precisely right that it looked wrong to anyone who hadn't studied how that kind of light actually falls. She knew that painting. Or she knew one like it. She had spent 3 months last year restoring a smaller piece from the same period, same style, possibly the same hand. "Nadia," Layla's voice, somewhere behind her. "Don't stand in the middle of the entrance." She moved. She kept moving. A woman stopped them before they even reached their table. Her name was apparently Lady someone. Nadia missed it, and she was the kind of person who smiled with her mouth while her eyes were doing something entirely different. She greeted Layla warmly, the way people greet someone they want something from. Then her gaze slid to Nadia. "And you are?" "Her sister," Nadia said. The woman looked at Nadia's dress, Layla's dress, and let a half-second of silence do its work. "How lovely," she said, and turned back to Layla. Nadia felt it. She always felt it. But she had long since stopped letting it show. She found her seat at a table near the east wall, close enough to the archway that she could still see the painting. Good. She could live with that. The king arrived after everyone was seated. That was the word people used. King. Not in a ceremonial sense. He was not a head of state. But Elias Ashford ran the kind of family business that made governments nervous, and he moved through a room with the ease of someone who had never once questioned whether he belonged anywhere. He was not performing confidence. He simply had it the way some people have good posture, naturally, without thinking about it. The room noticed him. Of course it did. Nadia was still looking at the painting. She was trying to figure out whether the brushwork in the lower left corner was original, or if someone had touched it up in the last 100 years. The varnish had yellowed just slightly in that section, in a way that didn't quite match the rest. It was the kind of thing that took patience to see. Most people would never see it. She didn't notice Elias Ashford noticing her. His advisor did, though. The man standing just behind Elias's left shoulder quietly set down his wine glass when he saw where Elias's eyes had stopped. Halfway through the first course, someone sat down in the empty chair beside Nadia. She looked up. She had seen his face in the photographs her sister had shown her on the drive over. "Just so you know who's who," Layla had said, so she knew who he was. But knowing and seeing were different things, and in person, He looked less like a powerful man and more like a tired one. The kind of tired that comes not from lack of sleep, but from too many years of rooms exactly like this one. "You've been looking at that painting since you arrived," he said. No greeting, no performance of small talk. "Is that a problem?" she asked. "No," he said. "Everyone else has been looking at me." She considered that for a moment. "That must get old." "Faster than you'd think," he said. She looked back at the painting, then at him. "The lower left corner has been restored," she said. "Badly. Maybe 40, 50 years ago, someone tried to cover damage and made it worse. The varnish doesn't match. It's aging at a different rate." He turned to look at the painting, then back at her. "How do you know that?" "It's what I do," she said. "I restore paintings. Old ones, mostly. The kind that have been misunderstood for a long time." There was a pause. Not an uncomfortable one. "I always thought that painting was a Flemish copy," he said. "Late 17th century. "It's not a copy," she said. "The light is too intentional. A copyist would have reproduced it correctly but not understood it. Whoever painted that understood exactly what they were doing." She paused. "You might want to get it properly assessed." "By you?" he asked. "I wasn't suggesting that." "I was," he said. They talked through the first course and most of the second. Not about the event, not about business or social currency, or any of the things people usually talked about in rooms like this. They talked about the painting, about what it means to restore something that everyone has been looking past for decades, about whether beauty that goes completely unseen still has value. Nadia had strong opinions about this, which surprised him, and did not surprise her at all. At one point he asked her, genuinely, "Why are you here tonight?" "My sister's original guest canceled," she said. It was the plain truth. "What would you have been doing otherwise?" "Working," she said. "I have a piece I'm halfway through. An 18th century landscape. The previous restorer made a mess of the sky." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "And you would have preferred that?" It wasn't quite a question. She answered it anyway. "I would have been more useful there," she said. "Here I'm just background." Something shifted in his face. "You're the only person in this hall who found something wrong with a painting I've walked past for 15 years, he said. "That's not background." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Which was, she was starting to realize, apparently something he found refreshing. He took her to the East Gallery before dessert. Not alone. His advisor followed at a distance, which she appreciated for reasons she didn't examine too closely. 3 paintings, lower lighting, a different kind of air. The main painting hung at the far end. Closer to it, the details she had noticed from across the hall became even more obvious. She walked toward it slowly. She reached out, stopped herself, just before touching it. Old habit. And leaned in to look at the lower corner. "Here," she said, half to herself. Whoever did this tried to match the color, but didn't account for how the original pigment would age. In 10 more years, the difference will be visible to anyone. "Can it be corrected?" "Yes," she said, then caught herself. "Sorry, I keep speaking as if I've been hired." "Would that be such a bad thing?" he said. She turned to look at him. He was watching her with a kind of focused attention that she was not accustomed to. Not from anyone, and certainly not from someone like him. It was not romantic in a way that made her uncomfortable. It was simply real, like he was actually seeing her. She had spent so long being fine, being background, being one step behind, that being genuinely seen felt strange. Not bad, just strange, like light coming into a room that had been dark for a long time. When they returned to the hall, the difference in the room was immediate. Not dramatic, no gasps, no music swell, just the slow adjustment of 100 pairs of eyes trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Layla was 3 tables away. She had been watching the door to the east wing, Nadia realized. She had been waiting. When Nadia and Elias walked back in together, Layla's expression did something complicated. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was something closer to confusion, the face of someone whose map of the world has just been corrected in a way they hadn't expected. She had always loved Nadia. She just had never once thought that Nadia might be the one other people looked at. The lady from earlier, the one who had made the silence do its work, saw them too. Something moved behind her eyes. A second look. A reassessment. The Duchess of the Estate. Elias's aunt, made her way over. She greeted Elias briefly, then turned to Nadia. "He never leaves his seat at the head table," she said, not unkindly. "In 12 years of hosting this dinner, I have never once seen him do it." She looked at Nadia steadily. "Clearly you are more interesting than the rest of us combined." "I just knew something about a painting," Nadia said. "My dear," the Duchess said, "so do half the curators in London. The difference is that he's still here talking to you." Later, near the end of the evening, Nadia found herself alone in the entrance hall for a moment. Layla was saying goodbye to someone. The cars were beginning to pull up outside. Elias found her there. He held out a card. Small, personal, on the back, in handwriting that was neater than she expected, he had written the name of the painting, the real name, the one she had mentioned in passing, and below it, a date. 2 weeks from now. I'd like to have it properly assessed, he said. And if the assessment says what I think it's going to say, I'd like it restored correctly. By someone who actually understands what they're looking at. She took the card. This is a professional offer, she said. Not a question, making sure. It is, he said. Then, after a pause that was exactly 1 beat too long to be casual, it's also an excuse. She looked at him. To see you again, he said, simply, without any performance around it. She didn't blush. She didn't look away. She thought about 26 years of being fine, being background, being one step behind. She thought about the painting in the East Gallery, with the poorly restored corner that everyone had walked past for 15 years. She thought about how the most overlooked things were sometimes the most real. I'll be in touch, she said, and she walked out, not behind Layla, not beside her as an afterthought, but just herself, moving at her own pace, toward her own life. In the car on the way home, Layla was quiet for longer than usual. Eventually she said, I never knew you knew so much about paintings. You never asked, Nadia said. Not harshly, just honestly. Another silence. I'm asking now, Layla said. And Nadia, for the first time in a long time, talked about the work she loved, about the quiet satisfaction of making something invisible beautiful again, about what it felt like to look closely at something the whole world had been rushing past. Layla listened, really listened. It was, Nadia thought, a beginning. 3 weeks later, she walked back through those gates, alone this time, with her equipment case in hand and a signed agreement in her bag. The restoration took 4 months. It was some of the most careful, most satisfying work she had ever done. And somewhere in the middle of those 4 months, on a quiet Tuesday when the light in the East Gallery was exactly right, Elias came and sat nearby while she worked, asking about color, about pigment, about why certain things that seem damaged are actually just waiting for the right person to understand them. She answered every one. She had been waiting a long time to be asked.